Welcome back to the School of Muscle. Today, Mikkel joins me to discuss low energy availability, and he recently authored a study on this topic, and I think there's some really cool takeaways for people lifting weights and looking to improve their fitness and muscle and different things like that, because they specifically looked at how low energy availability kind of influences different metabolic markers relating to muscle growth and things like that. So the first place I'd like to start here, Mikkel, is I think a lot of people, they may have heard about low energy availability, but it's still what I feel like is maybe a kind of a newer term that not everybody kind of knows exactly what we're talking about. So first off, maybe we can just start with what is low energy availability?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give the technical term and then the translation of it into layman language, and then we can maybe take a little deep dive into the background for it. So low energy availability builds upon energy availability, and energy availability is calculated from your energy intake minus your energy expenditure from exercise, and then we normalize that to your lean body mass. So basically all lean tissue in your body. That includes muscles, it includes organs, and so on. So low energy availability is basically a set point where the energy becomes insufficient for your body to sustain normal physiological function. That's the technical term, and that's a scientific term. So if we take what you basically should know is that low energy availability is a term for underfueling, in terms of underfueling compared to the exercise you're doing. So you're basically not eating enough, and that creates a problem for your body. So it can't sustain the normal processes that it should. And the concept is basically built from female athletes. So it's built from the observation in female athletes, where we see that female athletes tend to, when they are doing elite sports, they tend to have a loss of their menstrual cycle, have a loss of their menstrual bleeding specifically. And that was an observation made many, many years ago. But they evolved this concept to what's called the female athlete triad. And that is the recognition or the condition of a coexistence in female athletes of a loss of the menstrual cycle called amenorrheic or oligomenorrheic. So a loss of the menstrual dysfunction, you could say. That is related to a loss of bone mass density as well, so a reduced bone health. But it also coexists, or it can coexist, with eating disordered, so disordered eating basically. And it's this triad, it's this like triangle saying that everything is coexisting, and maybe the eating disorder is creating even like more menstrual dysfunction, but the menstrual dysfunction is always also creating a reduction in bone health. That's like the whole background. So what we know now is that low energy availability is basically the causative factor for this triad. So it's the factor that is driving menstrual dysfunctions, reduced bone health, eating disordered, and everything is basically going in a loop from there. So it's going full circle. If you happen to enter low energy availability, then you risk being in this triad, and you risk like keeping these like three things tend to like go in a ring, and it's going like it's an evil spiral almost, you could say.
So kind of a vicious cycle to where one thing feeds into the next, which feeds into the next, and then just can kind of keep getting worse and worse. And kind of the example that I think about sometimes is like sometimes people get really poor sleep, and then that causes them to drink more caffeine, which causes them to have worse sleep because they're drinking too much caffeine already. And then it's just like this vicious cycle there. So it sounds like kind of a similar thing to where it just kind of spirals into each other. And kind of one question regarding low energy availability that, wasn't kind of super clear to me is whether it is also related to someone losing weight or not? As I think some people think, low energy availability might just be that they are in a calorie deficit. Like, isn't that what you need to do to lose body fat? But it seems like there's kind of a distinction between low energy availability and just being in a calorie deficit. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So energy availability is basically a calculation of poorly what you're putting into the body. Whereas the concept of energy balance is basically what comes out of the system. So energy availability is a simple equation because we can take everything that goes in and we can take the exercise and then we can see where the body is at. It's not that like energy balance is more complicated because it is the output of the system. So a energy balance is when your weight is stable. And the concept of energy availability is it's not the same. And that's like they are distinct, but they are pretty similar as well. So it's difficult. But what you should know is basically that low energy availability is specifically when exercise is part of the equation. It's when we can take exercise and we can take it from your energy intake. Low energy availability is always or most often researched when we have exercise in the equation. And low energy availability, as I said, is when the energy gets below a certain threshold or below a certain point. So you should see it as losing weight. You can be in a low energy availability state if you're losing weight, yes, but it's most likely if you're doing it pretty aggressively.
Gotcha. So could someone still be in a state in which they are roughly maintaining weight, but still in kind of a low energy availability state, in which I know that I've had clients before to where they've been like dieting for so long, in which after that diet, they'll just bump their calories a little bit and then they just kind of end up maintaining weight, but they're still experiencing a lot of symptoms of kind of their diet, of like feeling run down. Maybe they're kind of still noticing symptoms with not having their period or stuff like that, but they're still kind of maintaining weight there. So is it possible to still be kind of in this low energy availability state while still actually maintaining body weight?
Yeah, so that's where the distinction basically is, and it's difficult. It's very difficult because scientifically, we can't really see that observationally because our studies usually are pretty short. So over a short time period, when you start a diet, over weeks, you will lose weight. So it's so basically at that time, like losing weight and low energy availability will probably be the same, but the observation that you're talking about is more related to the chronic state of low energy availability, where things are happening and your body has adapted, and now your body is in this state of menstrual dysfunction, low bone health, a risk of eating disorder, and so forth, and everything is basically going in a loop and it's going down there, even though you may not be losing weight.
If someone's kind of listening to this, they might be thinking, well, how do I actually know if I'm in a low energy availability state? Do I just have to look at those different proxies, like, losing their period or different things kind of related to that? Or is there a good way to kind of know?
So this is where it becomes extremely difficult. And that's very much a work in process in the scientific field right now as well, because we don't really have like the perfect biomarker to say you are for sure low energy availability. We have these proxies, as you say. So for females, that's usually a lack of menstrual period. That's the most common thing. After that comes symptoms like feeling like your mood is kind of off. Maybe your sleep ends up going a bit off as well. Your gastro, you may have some gastro problems as well, actually. If you're male, you obviously can't lose your period. So for the males, the one thing that we have is a lack of sleep is one thing, but probably the strongest thing is erectile dysfunction, actually. So a lack of sexual drive. It is very, very difficult, and we don't have the perfect biomarker right now. But if there is like a take-home message or something we can say right now, it's probably that if you experience one of these like clear symptoms, you should probably be concerned, or you should meet with your physician or whatever. Make sure that your diet is on point. Secondly, if you don't have these symptoms, you should ask yourself, whenever you're exercising a lot, specifically when you're doing a lot of cardiovascular exercise, are you fueling your body? Are you increasing your fuel and your caloric intake on these days? And will that then match the exercise training that you're actually doing?
I think in my kind of reading of this topic, it is kind of tricky to know for sure whether someone is kind of in this state. But I think that by looking at someone's calorie intake, looking at their exercise, looking at these different proxies, you can kind of get an idea of at least of, okay, I think that this is probably what's going on here. So I think that's a really good takeaway. So now to kind of transition into the kind of topic of today's discussion regarding your guys' study here, what kind of led you, and I'll make sure to have this study linked in the description below for those that want to kind of read it. I believe the full text is free and available, so I'll make sure to link that below. So kind of with that, what kind of led you to wanting to do this study? And then we can kind of dive into the methods, results, and kind of what you guys found.
Awesome. Yeah, sure. So basically, there is a consensus statement right now regarding REDS, or REDS, that's called relative energy deficiency in sport. And it's basically the technical term that evolves around low energy availability. You've probably heard it. Most people have heard about it. And we know some things that's related to low energy availability. So some of the big things that we know is that menstrual dysfunction goes down, or your period, female reproductive system basically is shutting off. We can also see it for thyroid hormone, so the hormones related to resting metabolic rate. And we also have some research indicating that there is something going on in the bone. So that's pretty well established somewhat right now, but we haven't really seen a good study looking into muscle physiology specifically. So our study, or our goal, was basically to take a deep dive and see if we could do this study where we could see how female athletes were basically responded when we exposed them to low energy availability. And we wanted specifically to look at muscle protein synthesis. So basically your ability to build muscle when we exposed you to either low or optimal energy availability.
Perfect. And typically when I have a researcher on, I ask them about kind of their expectations heading into it, but based on the lack of evidence kind of around muscle growth and low energy availability, I'm guessing there couldn't be like terribly strong expectations, but did you have certain expectations kind of heading into the study, like for your kind of hypothesis? What did you kind of think was going to happen here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so our hypothesis was actually pretty clear. We thought that that muscle protein synthesis would definitely go down. It's the rational thinking, and it's basic. It's pretty physiology thinking, right? I mean, we reduce something here, the energy system will maybe shut down, and then that will unravel or like to turn into a lack of muscle protein synthesis and so on. We also have some indications from like the basic energy deficiency literature as well in obese individuals or in males, but the research in general in females are very much lacking.
Well, I think that leads us right into what did you guys kind of decide to do here? How'd you set things up, and what were your kind of methods for this study?
Basically, we wanted to do a high quality study so we could like really make conclusive findings on this. And obviously, like the perfect study would probably be a long-term study, say 10 weeks or something, where we had two groups, one group being in low and one group being in optimal energy availability, and then see how the body responded. But if we were to do that, it wouldn't be very ethical. That's one thing. And it would be extremely, extremely hard to do as well. So what we decided to do instead was to shorten the period to basically a 16-day study where 10 of the days was in low energy availability, and then apply some very, very solid methods so we could actually, even though the study was short, we could probably extrapolate it to what would be going on over long term. So diving into the study, we basically did a 10-day intervention with low energy availability in female athletes, or that's one group, and the other group was an optimal energy availability. As I said, the study was actually 16 days long. So before we started the intervention period, we did a run-in period, so-called, where everybody came in and we had them on a diet. We had them on a optimal energy availability diet and the start of the training. So they could basically start the lead-in period, lead into the study, before we actually started the intervention. And that usually, that enabled us to measure via muscle biopsies, to actually measure for all individuals how was their muscle protein synthesis when everybody is in optimal or receiving optimal energy availability. And then we can see the change after with the 10-day period. So with this study design, we could basically measure muscle protein synthesis via muscle biopsies and tracer morphology to see how muscle protein synthesis was changed both in the group observing low energy availability and the group observing optimal energy availability. And then what happened, we could basically compare that to the optimal situation. So that's the study is pretty huge, so I'm just taking like the main things here, but basically, in short, we collected blood, urine, saliva, muscle from these women to do these analysis, and the primary one was obviously done on the muscle biopsies using double label water as a tracer. And using this tracer technique, we can basically measure how the accumulated response, so measure how much tracer is incorporated into the muscle over the time period where we investigate the individuals. And that gives us a pretty good proxy of how much muscle protein synthesis, like the turnover of muscle protein synthesis, that's actually taking place each day of the study.
And then as for the diet and exercise interventions themselves, I think when reading the study, it looked like for the group that was in low energy availability, I think you guys put them on about 25 calories per kilo of body weight. And with that kind of amount of calories there, that was kind of estimated to put them in this kind of low energy availability state. And then I believe the group that was in optimal energy availability was 50 calories per kilo of body weight, so about double. Is that correct for your kind of dietary intervention?
So it was per fat-free mass, but yes.
Perfect. Yep. So, if someone was 200 pounds, 10% body fat, it would have been based off of like 180 pounds, not 200 pounds because of that kind of body fat in there. So kind of with that, it looks like you guys also basically gave them pre-prepped meals throughout the intervention of the study and actually kind of gave them these kind of pre-calculated and pre-packaged meals. Is that right?
Yeah. So as I said, we really wanted to like stay on top of everything. So make it extremely high control and reduce any kind of noise that we could observe. So yes, we controlled everything they ate. So I basically went to the supermarket, I bought snacks for them, breakfast, and then lunch and dinner was basically delivered through meals that we bought through a Danish company making them. And the exercise as well. We wanted to stay on top of the exercise. So they basically came in pretty much every day to the university and did the training supervised at the university. We also did the programming. So we basically took and recruited trained individuals who were used to doing resistance exercise and used to doing cardiovascular exercise, and then we put them on a cardiovascular and resistance exercise program. And we recognize that when you put somebody on a program, like if you could, like maybe you could say that Ryan, you're trained. I'm just doing some training as well. So maybe we would categorize both of us as trained individuals. But maybe you're doing much more training. Likely, you're doing much higher training volume than I am. So basically what we did was we customized the training programs, and we also matched the individuals. So we basically found a person who were as trained as you, Ryan, and then put them through the same program. So if there were any differences within the individual, like from a more trained individual to a less trained individual, we would have the same response in both groups.
Perfect. So you made their training relative to what they were kind of already doing to kind of do your best to try to get the similar stimulus for muscle growth and these different kind of physiological indicators that you guys were measuring here. Yeah. So, I mean, I credit to you guys. I see why this was like, I can't imagine doing this for like 10 weeks, because getting people to like do prepackaged meals for 10 weeks and like doing all that sounds like a headache in of itself. And also for like, for doing this for 10 to 15 days, like I think that is definitely challenging. So credit to you guys for putting all this together. So I think kind of with that covers kind of the dietary intervention, the training intervention, the kind of low energy availability group versus the optimal energy availability group. So now I think we're kind of good to transition into a bit of the good stuff here. What did you guys kind of find? What were the results here?
Awesome. Yeah, perfect. So our result was basically that from the muscle biopsies that we took, we could see that muscle protein synthesis measured in two different fractions or two different pools, being the myofibrillar portion, that is all the contractile protein in the muscle, and the sarcoplasmic portion, that is enzymes, mitochondria, and so forth. Both of these fractions were actually reduced with low energy availability compared to optimal energy availability. So that was our primary outcome. Basically, the take-home message being that if you are in a low energy availability, a state of low energy availability while doing resistance exercise and exercise training in general, your responsiveness to muscle or in the muscle and your ability to build muscle as well is reduced. So that was the primary outcome of the study.
And it seems like that kind of matched your expectations heading into it. That low energy availability does kind of negatively affect some of these physiological factors regarding muscle growth. So I'm guessing the results didn't surprise you much here?
No, I mean, they didn't surprise you much, but you know, you never know when you're doing such a study. You put in so much work and you hope for good results. And I mean, sure, as a scientist, you shouldn't be expecting too much, because that's not the scientific method. But at the end of it, when you put in so much work, right, you would like to see some good results, and we definitely got that, I would say.
Based on this study and based on some of your other research regarding low energy availability, for a kind of population, the people listening to this, they're probably looking to maximize muscle growth, maximize their physique, their body compositions. And I know that there's probably also coaches listening to this that coach clients to stage that also involves their clients maybe losing their period and kind of in that low energy availability state. So kind of based on your research and what we've talked about today, what do you think might be some kind of practical takeaways for those coaches to consider, or if someone's coaching themselves to consider regarding low energy availability here?
So I think it's pretty difficult here when you're talking about both coaches. I mean, physique athletes, that's one thing, because that's an extreme sport, and those athletes, they need by the sake of the sport and to perform or to get medals in the sport, to be a very, very low body fat percentage. So they will at some point get to a state of low energy availability. And if there is anything, then they should be aware of during that period or after that period, they should really be aware of lifting themselves out of it. Because we know if you're in this state chronically, bad stuff is going to happen. And that's not only for muscle. That's all. That's also for your reproductive function. It's also for your bone health. It's also increasing your risk of getting an eating disorder. So for the professional athletes and the coaches, I would say you should you should be aware to supervise your clients, not only to get them low, but also help them out of there as well. For the more general population, I would say that it's a very cultural thing to think of being in a low body fat is something that you need, and it's something that you need to get a good life or whatever. And I think that sometimes I think there are way too much focus on losing weight and getting low in body fat. And I think that people should realize that every time that they try to get low and they want to like reduce their body fat percentage, it has a cost. It has a cost for the training quality. It has a cost for the ability to actually respond to the training. And it also has a cost mentally. So I think that we should be more aware of the consequences related to it, and maybe ask ourselves one more time before going into a caloric deficit. Could I improve my physique? Could I improve my muscle strength and so on, improve my training if I just kept training and I kept my training quality high, I stayed motivated, and I kept my fuel levels high? I think that's a pretty important message. It's comes down to asking yourself the question whether the correct thing right now is that to actually try to lose weight, or should I just maybe try to train hard and go for it.
And I think those are really good takeaways. And being a coach kind of in this physique space, I know that from my clients that we go to stage with, our goal there is to kind of go in and out of that kind of low energy availability state, that kind of dive into our prep, in and out of that as much as possible, and also set the expectations for that client that, hey, we're going to hit this body fat level, but once we hit it, our next goal is to get you back to a healthy level to where we have and proper energy availability, you have enough body fat to perform and actually see more progress. And then for my clients that aren't kind of interested in getting that lean and going to the stage, really try to spend as much time out of the year just not dieting. Like even if we stay at roughly maintenance calories, but we have enough energy availability to really fuel our training and to grow muscle, if you grow muscle while relatively maintaining your body fat, you're still going to improve your body composition that way. So I think that those are some really good takeaways, and it sounds like my kind of practical experience as a coach aligns with kind of what your recommendations are as a researcher and kind of based on your knowledge here.
I totally agree on you there, Ryan. Yeah, it's definitely, I think the important thing is that with this study, it's to just create more awareness, basically, regarding the cost of being too low, right? And create more awareness of maybe focusing more on being in optimal energy availability and spend your time there instead.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a really good take-home message. And with that, Mikkel, if there's any place that people want to kind of stay up to date with your research and kind of what you're doing, is there anywhere that they can kind of go and follow you online to kind of stay up to date with that?
Yeah, sure. I'm using my Twitter account, or my X account is my first name and last name. Maybe it's Oxford Mikkel, but you can go ahead and follow me there, and I'll pretty much link to all of my research regarding females in there. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I know I learned a ton, and hopefully the audience did as well. So I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure, Ryan. Thank you.